Hello, welcome back to Reads of an Apple. My name is Staci and I'm here to talk about the books I read in January of 2023. If you watched any of my other videos, you probably know January was pretty hectic for me. I finally found an apartment. I moved into my new apartment and yeah, there was just a lot going on and with life, and I read more surprisingly than I thought I was going to be able to get to, but as you will see, I read a lot more audio media books, so let's just kind of jump into it because there are some things to chat about. So I read 16 books for 4,778 pages. A little bit on the lower end, but I found the past couple years I have been under 20, and usually in the past my average was between 20 to 25, unless I was like binging a bunch of novellas or something like that. But so this kind of seems like it's the new normal, is between 15 and 20 to me, based off of what's happened the past couple years. But like I said, now that I'm in my new place, hopefully I'll just be able to start picking back up my reading. But anyway, I averaged 1.94 days per book, which I feel like is higher. Usually I'm under a day per book. And then the average page count was 300 cat hair, 318.53 pages. And then as for the page breakdowns of what I read 2 books in the 100s, 6 books in the 200s, 4 books in the 300s, 2 books in the 400s, and 1 book in the 800s. I picked up 7 new authors, but I had 0 rereads, but that is fine. I plan to reread more this year, but that's not usually that I don't do too much rereading unless I'm like rereading a huge series. So let me move forward here. So for book clubs, readathons, and read-alongs, I picked up 12 books specifically for that. So I only mood read for 4 books, which is crazy that it was so high this year, but I was able to complete all of my TBR books for those situations, which was, you know, give and take, right? 6 of the books I read had diversity of some kind. I read only 1 book was a standalone. That's the new stat for me, is I want to see how many books I read that are a part of a series, whether it's one big series or a series of interconnected interconnected standalones, or if it's just a complete one-off, not in any sort of types of series. So far, I am mainly a series reader, it seems. 4 of the books I picked up were recommended to me, and most of those did come from the read-alongs and stuff. 3 of the books I previously owned, and I added 6 books to my wish list. And then how I read books. I read 1 book physically. I read 4 books via my Kindle, so 4 ebooks, and then 10 audiobooks. Now, I do want to say this is 10 audiobooks and speech to listen. There are quite a few books this month that I had my Amazon device read it to me because I needed to get it done for a book club, and things just weren't going well at that point. And because I was moving and so much stuff, it was a lot easier for me to just have her read it to me instead of reading it myself. And then I did have 1 combo. So there was 1 book I read physically and I listened to the audio. Okay, as for publishing, I read 10 indie published books, 1 small publisher books, and 5 traditionally published. The decades I read in was 4 from the 2000s, 2 from the 2010s, and 10 from the 2020s. Apparently, I am switching to just being a 2020-ish readers and only reading new stuff, which is crazy. And then another new stat I'm tracking is age of the main characters. Now, sometimes they are differing, and sometimes I kind of have to guess by how they feel like to me. So this isn't, I don't know, set in stone. So some of this could be wrong, but and sometimes there's like a 30-year-old and a 20-year-old or whatever, but I went with the oldest just to kind of see what was going on. So I read 3 YA books. 7 of them were in their 20s. 1 of them was in their 30s. 1 of them was in their 40s. And 4 of these are supernatural, immortal, long-living type characters. So I just encompass them all in that, because even if they're only like 40, but they're a supernatural creature, then that 40 isn't like really 40. Does that make sense? So I just counted them as a supernatural creature, because if their lifespan is 500 years and they're only 40, they're more like a 20-year-old or something like that. So okay, I'll just move on. So another new stat I am keeping track of this year is where they are located. So 2 of the books I physically owned, or how, I guess not where they're located, because 3 of the books I did physically own, but of the books of the type that I read. So, for example, one of the books I own physically, but it was packed, so I read it via ebook. So where that ebook is from, so that's kind of where this gets slightly different. It seems different from my other stats, but you'll see. So 2 of the books I physically owned that I've read. So like I physically own them. That is how I read that version. There were 2 books that I digitally owned. 2 books were from KU, and then I checked out 6 books from Hoopla and 5 books from Libby, which is crazy. I feel like I have better luck with my Hoopla. And what's great is I met my goal of 5 checkouts. I have a goal because my Hoopla, my library allows me to check out 10 books, 10 items a month from Hoopla, and my goal was to at least check out 5. Now, technically, I checked out 7 this month because I checked out a documentary video, history kind of video thing. But that's not really a part of these stats, but it was exciting that for the first month, I was able to surpass my goal, although one of them is a bind up of 3 books. So my stats for February are going to be kind of weird, because technically 2 of the books I read via Hoopla, but they don't count as a checkout because I checked it out in January. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to track those yet, but I had 7 checkouts of my Hoopla, so I met my goal for January, which is great. And it was good that my Libby actually finally had something. I don't know why. My Libby is very frustrating for me and I have 2 library systems hooked to my Libby, and there's the one where I went to college, and then there's where I currently live now. And surprisingly, the one where I went to college, even though like where I live now, there's a huge college and it's a bigger college and it's a bigger town, but the other library system has better options via ebooks and audiobooks, and there's usually, if there's a long wait for something, it's usually half the wait time, which is nice. But I was excited to use my Libby more because I feel like that's only one every once in a while, few and far between, because they never have what I'm looking for in ebook or audiobook. But this month they did. Okay. Ratings. So I had 1 DNF. I had 5 5-stars, 3 4.5 stars, 4 4 stars, 1 3.5 star, and 2 2.5 stars. I very rarely rate anything lower than a 3-star, but I had a couple doozies this month. And then the last stat I keep track of is genres. So for the main subgenres, I read 4 contemporaries, 2 fantasies, 2 historicals, 5 paranormals, and 2 sci-fi romances. And then I read 1 urban fantasy. And then as for my contemporary breakdown, 2 of them were just normal contemporaries. 1 was a rom-com, and 1 was a romantic suspense. Or at least that's what they called it. It wasn't very suspensey. Let's be honest. Okay, so let's talk about the books that I read now. So the first book I picked up in 2023 was Stolen by Her Bear by Felicy Heaton. This is the first book in her Black Ridge Bear series, which spun off of her Cougar Creek Mates series, which I read at the end of 2022. And I give this 4.5 stars. It was super fun. I'm a big fan of bear shifters. I'm a big fan of how Felicy Heaton writes shifters. And this was just super fun. It's a grumpy bear shifter, and him and his 2, I don't know if they're brothers in like the relation sense, or if they're just, I think they're brothers, but they're all like one big bear family kind of a thing. But they get woken up by the cougars having a party. They are prepping for a marriage of one of the couples in the previous series, and they get woken up as they're in hibernation, and they are super grumpy, and so they go down, and this is Holly and Saint kidnaps Holly thinking that she is her best friend Ember, because he wants the wedding to not happen, and he wants them to be quiet and leave everybody alone and go back to wherever they go during winter. And he ends up capturing the wrong person, and then they find out they are fated mates. And this is also set during Christmas, which I didn't realize it. So it was a holiday romance, a holiday paranormal romance, and it was great fun. 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and it's a great way to kick off the series. And we get hints on at least the 2 other guys that are there with them. So it was great fun. Then I picked up the 3 books for the Vampire Academy read-along. These are books that I have never read before. I haven't read very much YA. When I was in high school, I kind of jumped from... Or I guess I wasn't in high school, but in high school I was reading adult books. And I just kind of jumped from little kid books and like chapter books to adult books. I never really got into YA very much. So I did pick up the first 3 books because that's what was assigned for the read along of the series. So book 1 is Vampire Academy. So this series is interesting, and we're kind of set, I guess it's like a private high school, but it kind of was giving me college vibes, but I feel like it's more of high school aged. But we've got Rose and Dimitri. I feel like those are one of the main couples. And then we have Lissa and Christian, but Lissa is a vampire, and Lissa is the vampire, and Rose is a dampier, and she is basically the roles of what Rose is to protect and be bodyguards of the vampires. And dampiers are usually they're mixed, so they're half human, half vampire usually. And they had escaped from the school because there were situations where Lissa was put in danger, and none of the professors or adults at the school kind of realized the situation, and so they escaped, and they're finally captured and brought back, and they are brought back by Dimitri, and he is older, and he is also a Dampier, and they're bringing him back because, and then he's giving Rose special treatment, and theirs is like, I want to say the main romance, because we spend most of the time in Rose's POV. And so this is like age gap, teacher-student kind of vibes. But then he's also added as the other Dampier assigned to Lissa, so that she has 2 guardians now. And yeah, so this is them returning to the school after they've been on their own for several months, and just kind of getting back into the swing of things, and we're learning more about what magic Lissa has. Vampires have different types of magic, and it's mostly elemental based, which is really cool. And yeah, it's them kind of dealing with figuring out what kind of magic Lissa has, and then we have the big bad of this book. And so I enjoyed it. A lot more than I thought I would. Most of this was I had read to me, text to speech, because I was packing and doing stuff. I guess it was at the beginning of the month, so I wasn't packing yet. But I was doing lots of things, so I had it read to me, and I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it definitely was like felt younger to me, and the decisions they were making, you could tell they were very young, but I just kind of went with it because I didn't want to knock a YA book for being YA, even though that's something that I never really identified with, even as that age group. But yeah, I enjoyed it. 4 stars. And then I immediately picked up the second book, and that is Frostbite in the series. And this one I gave 3.5 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much. I thought that Rose and some of their friend group were making very silly decisions. And I get that it's YA, but the decisions, I don't know, it just felt like some of the characters or the situations that were going on, they were like, in their maturity and their decision-making skills, it regressed, only to be shot forward at the end of the book. And it just felt like, I mean, we had high stakes at the end of the first book, but there were like hints of it and leading it up. And I felt like for this book specifically, the high stakes near, like in the last third of the book, didn't quite fit the lead up coming up to it. So it just felt like, and I know that she was talking about the situation of what's going on with the Strigoi, who are like the evil vampire people. And it just, and like, so like hints were being dropped, but the buildup didn't feel like it was there. And then, I don't know, it just felt off to me. So I gave it 3.5 stars because I still thought it was fun. Something just felt off. Character-wise, plot-wise, it just didn't quite hit me as good. And then I picked up the third book, which is Shadow Kiss. And this one I gave 4 stars. So back in the better trajectory. I liked this book. I liked this book a lot. I thought it was super fun. And this is the book that kind of really hooked me into the series. Like the way that it ends, I'm just like, I'm very excited. During the live show that was at the end of the month, a lot of people were saying that books 4 basically through 6 are their favorites in the series. And I'm very intrigued to see what kind of happens. Here we get a lot of growth from the characters, but it felt natural. And it felt like the situations and everything escalated smoothly. I felt like the plot overall was just a lot more paced, or better paced. And when we got to the high stakes at the end, it didn't feel like quite as drastic of a mood shift. You could kind of get the hints that things were kind of moving up, even though the characters didn't realize they were moving up. So I felt like the overall tension of this book was the best so far. So I'm excited to continue to read the series and see what happens, especially after that cliffhanger with whatever was happening during the end of this book. Okay, and this one I ended up reading physically via ebook. These three I got through my Libby, but the first two I mostly were text to speech, but then the third one I actually physically read. Okay, and then I picked up a couple audiobooks. So the fifth book I read was The Devil's Necklace. This is the second book in the Necklace trilogy by Kat Martin. I had read the first book in December of 2022 and enjoyed it. And I was looking for historical to kind of pick up, seeing what I had planned out for the rest of the month. And I went with this one because I had just read the first book and I enjoyed it. And so I was like, I'll read this one. And this is Grace and Ethan. And Grace is best friends with the heroine in the previous book. And Ethan is the person that we rescue in the first book. And we find out that Grace is actually a bastard child. Her father is not her actual father. And which explains the horrendous relationship that she has with him, because he hates her because she is a constant reminder that his wife had an affair with someone of the aristocracy, of which she is a part of, but her father's like a doctor or something like that. I don't know. It was kind of, I didn't quite understand how her family sits in society, because she went to the same school as our heroine, who is a member of the aristocracy. So I don't know. But anyway, she finds out who her real father is, and that he had written letters to her and had thought about her his entire life, but he just was never allowed, or in the position allowed by her mother, to have a real relationship with her, and her mother had hidden all of these letters. And she finds out that her father is put on trial for treason, and he is believed to be the person who leaked Ethan's whereabouts, which then led to his capture by the French, which is where we rescued him from the first book. So he finds out that her father has escaped jail. He thinks that she has something to do with it, but he thinks that she is his mistress who's helping him escape, and not his daughter. So she is headed to her aunt, who's actually from her father's side. So she had never met them before. And so she's going to go spend time with them and really get to be with her father's side of the family. And he catches her down across the ocean or whatever, and kidnaps her. And he is thinking she's her mistress, so he's very rude with her, and she's just like, I don't understand what this dude is going on about. And she tries to like play up her being a lady and stuff, and it just, I don't know, I just enjoyed the tension. I gave this book 4 stars. It was a lot of fun. Once again, it was a little long. I feel like the first book was a little long, this one was a little long, but this one I felt like was better paced overall, and I really enjoyed my time reading this. A lot happened in this book. There was a lot of situations going on. We've got Ethan dealing with, he is now a member of the aristocracy because his older brother, I think, died. But he's now he can't do his sea captaining stuff. And then we've got Grace and her father, and trying to track her father down. But her father is trying to prove that he is innocent. So then we have trying to figure out if her father is the real traitor, and if he's not, then trying to figure out who the real traitor is. And then we get a surprise pregnancy. So, I mean, there's a lot in this book, and we do actually see them with the baby at the end. And I mean, there's a lot that goes in this book, so I understand why it's long. I feel like some of the plot threads could have been taken out and it still would have been good, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great audiobook, 4 stars, and I plan on picking up the last book in the trilogy at some point soon, hopefully. Okay, so then I picked up another audiobook and I chose Coming Up Roses by Staci Hart. This is the first book in her Bennett Brothers series, and this series is a contemporary retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but it's not just like Pride and Prejudice. Each book is focused on a character from Pride and Prejudice. So this first book is gender-bent retelling of Lydia. So Lydia here is Luke, so this is Tess and Luke. And the Bennett family owns a private flower shop, I want to say New York City. And he had gotten married, moved to California, and is now divorced, and has come back home because the family business is going through hardships. And so him and his family members have all come back home to help save the flower shop. And he re-meets Tess, and it is their romance. We have mutual pining, working together, and I mean, it's a lot. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I thought it was super fun. It was the first time I've read Staci Hart. I have quite a few of her books on my TBR, so I was excited to kind of finally get to read one of her books. And I definitely want to read more in this series, and I want to read her other Austen series that's more like singular retellings of Austen works in each book. And yeah, so this is a great start. I give this 4.5 stars. My biggest downfall with this was the situation with his ex-wife. And yes, but it kind of makes sense for the fact that he's retelling she's retelling Lydia's story and basically getting her out of that marriage that happened. But I don't know, I wasn't a fan of her character and how much she kept coming back and causing issues in the current relationship. But he got there, you know, and it was a process. But I also understood with why he wouldn't just cut her off, because she did have substance abuse problems, and I don't know if quite depression, but just mental health issues. And she was also very manipulative in the way that she would threaten suicide or threaten hurting herself as a form of manipulation. And I never quite got if she was actually suicidal or if she was, I don't know, or doing this as a manipulation tactic. And just, I don't know, it was kind of confusing. But I understood why with this weird situation he couldn't just cut her off, because he was worried that just cutting her off would cause her to actually finally take these drastic measures that she had been threatening him with for years. So I understood why. It just felt, I don't know, I'm just not a fan of other women drama. So, but 4.5 stars. Okay, then the 7th book I picked up is my combo book of the month, and that was Clean Sleep by Ilona Andrews. I am reading this as a continuation of the Ilona Andrews read-along, and right now we are in the Innkeeper Chronicles read-along. This is book 1 in the series. I read this physically, listened to the graphic audio. If you have not listened to graphic audios, they are absolutely amazing. They are a movie in your mind. They're available, most of the graphic audios are available on Hoopla, so definitely check them out if you haven't. It definitely took a lot longer to listen to the audiobook than I would have normally read this with, but it's so good because we get sound effects and each person has their own character actor and there's music and it's just so much fun. And this is such the perfect series for it because this is like a paranormal sci-fi fantasy blend that is just so much fun. It is a slow burn. We get just a tiny little hint of romance here. But it's just, I mean, Ilona Andrews is magic. This is the funniest book I have ever read from them. Their humor always hits it out of the park for me. But this one had me laughing almost the entire time. It's just so much fun. And you could tell that they had fun writing this. Like, they were just like throwing everything at the wall and letting it all stick. It was just so much fun. Although I know Ilona Andrews isn't that haphazard with the way that they world build and create things. But so, basic rundown of this series is Dina is our main character and she is what's called an innkeeper. Now, Earth is just one planet in the grand universe, basically, and is a common place to stop over when you're traveling from planet to planet. And so these inns are magic and special and fantastic and basically help these different alien creatures have a safe place to stay on their layover, basically. And she has been tasked with bringing back to life Gertrude Hunt, which is the name of her inn. And we see her kind of getting things up and running. And she has one basically permanent residence. And she ends up getting a couple more. And she is hoping that she can get this to be a well-known inn, so that someone can come in and see the picture of her parents that she has posted on the wall and maybe know what happened to them, because her parents went missing a couple years ago. Them and their inn just disappeared and they've been looking for them ever since. And I loved it. I loved it. We get a second generation alpha werewolf and it's so much fun. It is so much fun and it feels cozy. And I mean, I love Ilona Andrews, but I'm so happy to read this series. And seriously, please check out the graphic audios. They are so much fun if you haven't tried it. So 5 stars. Amazing. Okay, then I picked up the ebook because this book was packed away and thankfully my library had it. But House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, Crescent City, book number 1. I'm reading this for the SJM along. We are almost through the SJM along. I can't believe there's only 2 books left. And I gave this book 5 stars. It's the last like 20% of this, I was either constantly in tears, both good and sad, or happy and sad, or like trying to recover from my tears, only to, as soon as like my tear ducts dried up, I'd find myself bawling again. It took me a little bit to get into it. I didn't really connect with Bryce at first, and my heart was completely destroyed at the beginning of the first part, and I was like, why do you do this to us, Sarah? But I love this. 5 stars. I don't even know what to say. There's just so much in this book, but it is phenomenal. And I love that it feels the same type of coziness, but it's a completely different setting. But there's a lot of connections to the other books in this, and I'm excited to get to the end of the SJM along so that our live shows can be complete, like no spoilers needed, no vague hints for people who have read all of the books before, and we can just sit and talk about everything and not have to worry about spoilers. And Thanks to this read along, I am now a Sarah J. Maas stan, and I know I am on the caboose of this long hype train, but it's so much fun. And I cannot wait to read the second book, but we gotta get through A Court of Silver Flames first, which I feel like is another book that's going to completely wreck me. But anyway, I read this. 5 stars. It's amazing. And look at this cover. Isn't it gorgeous? I love this cover. It is so pretty. It's so pretty. Okay, then I kind of went wild a little bit, and I picked up the audiobook for Riv's Sanctuary by A.G. Wilde, another new to me offer. And this is somehow I found another like alien romance where the human is kept in a zoo, but Riv's Sanctuary is the first book in Riv's Sanctuary, and it's never quite explained, but I feel like maybe the other books in the series go into it. But Lauren has been kept at a zoo for over a year, so this isn't like a new abductee, which was interesting. She has been in captive at the zoo for over a year, and one day her zookeeper finally shows up and is trying to get rid of her really quickly. So I'm guessing that we'll see in the other book something about humans are becoming like known and seen as intelligent species of their own, so they won't be able to be like taken captive for zoos and stuff, but that's never really quite explained. But someone ends up buying her, and then as an additional bedmate for him and his mate, and his mate hates her upon sight, and he ends up taking him to his friend Riv, who owns an animal sanctuary, and finagling his way into leaving Lauren there. And Riv is the owner of the sanctuary. He is just a grumpy, recluse alien, and it is their romance, and it was definitely a slow burn. I wasn't expecting it to be as much of a slow burn it was, but I feel like there was at some point where things kind of started changing, and they finally got him her Earth English added to his translation device thing. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze, and I'm like, is it coming? And so I thought, okay, now things are gonna really amp up now that they can speak the same language, but it's still kind of drug out a little bit. But overall, I enjoyed this. I'm interested in reading the rest of the series for sure. I give this 4 stars. It was fun. I just wanted I wanted him understanding her a little bit quicker. And this is like small town alien romance, because they're like on a sanctuary / farm. So, I mean, it was a fun mashup, and I definitely enjoyed it. And we get hints in this for the heroes of the other 2 books. So I'm excited for those. Then I picked up the first book for the ABCs of Love read-along. This is a multi-author series where they were given a letter as a prompt in the alphabet and wrote a book. So the first one is Amore by Kimberly Knight. I gave this 2.5 stars. And I had this as text-to-speech. I read this during the weekend that I was officially moving, so I definitely was distracted. But I gave this 2.5 stars, and I feel like the only reason I managed to read this entire book is because I was able to listen to it and not 100% pay attention to it. So yeah, this is Frankie and Luke. Luke is a police officer. They are from Tennessee, but they are currently in LA. And Frankie is an up-and-coming actress. And they were next door neighbors during, I think, middle school and high school, or maybe it was just high school, but there's mutual pining. They lost their virginity to each other, and they've been out of touch since they went to college, and this is their reconnection. This is technically called a romantic suspense. It didn't really feel suspense to me. I didn't really like how there was cheating involved here. Definitely emotional cheating. I also didn't like how Lucas's ex/current and then ex-girlfriend was portrayed. She's actually his partner on the police force, and I really didn't like that a woman, how she was portrayed as like the crazy ex, let alone the fact that she's a police officer and the type of training that police officers have to go through, and the fact that a woman police officer was portrayed that way, just, it felt gross to me, and I didn't really like that. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I read the new release from Ilona Anders, Magic Tides. This is technically Kate Daniels' 10.5, or book 1 in Kate Daniels' The Wilmington Years. And this is the Kate Daniels book I never knew existed and never knew I needed, but we did. We needed this. It was so much fun. This is mostly set in Kate's POV, but we also get a couple chapters from Curran's POV, which is super fun. And we get a couple chapters from Conlon's POV. And if you're thinking of where this fits in the series, this is set between the end of Magic Triumphs, which is the 10th book, the final book in the Kate Daniels, well, the final book in the original Kate Daniels series, since obviously it's not over yet. But this is also before the first book in Julie's series, which is Aurelia Rider, and the first book's Blood Heir. So this is set during the time period in between, because we know in Blood Heir, Kate and Curran are back in Atlanta. So this is between that time frame. But it was amazing. Ilona Anders is amazing, but getting back to Kate and Curran and seeing them living their lives and seeing Conlon as an 8-year-old with the magic of like a 400-year-old is so much fun. But then he seemed so grown up, and then he'd have these moments where, okay, there's the 8-year-old boy, but I mean, he's being trained by Kate's father in some areas, and it was just so much fun. And I love the way Curran is just like, remember, we want to keep low key, and Kate's just like, oh yeah, and she leaves, and he's just like, she's not gonna keep it low key. I know my wife. I know what she does. I'm preparing for things to hit the fan. And it was just, 5 stars. Amazing. I loved it. Are we really surprised though? But I cannot wait to see what they have planned for this series and what other hijinks all 3 of them get into in Wilmington. And this was a surprise release from Ilona Anders. They dropped like a month before it came out. Hey, surprise, we wrote something in Kate Daniels featuring Kate and Curran. So yeah, amazing. Then the 12th book I read or attempted to read was Beckon. This is by Verlene Landon, who I guess is actually the person who created the ABCs of Love series, or was one of the big authors kind of behind getting it rolling. And this is the second book, obviously. Oh, and this is my DNF of the month. I could not get into this book. It just really, really bothered me the way that representation was handled here, especially when it came to Chandler, I believe is the hero's name. So this is Tamitha, is the heroine, and she has some sort of OCD mental something as well, but it was never kind of pointedly talked about or diagnosed. It just kept she just kept calling them her quirks for, as far as I read, I DNF'd it around 35-ish%. But he is, and she is dealing with like PTSD and grief from losing her husband to a drunk driver. And then she also has a son. He is a veteran and he is dealing with PTSD from his time overseas and is very struggling, and big trigger warning, content warning, whatever you want to call it, for suicide. I mean, this did not feel triggering to me at all, but I did not like the way it was written about, and I just could not push myself to keep reading this. It is reiterated over and over and over that he's thinking about suicide. He's contemplating suicide. He is getting close to the step of actual, like, he's specifically planning on shooting himself. And so he's gotten as far as putting the gun in his mouth and just not pulling the trigger. So he hasn't taken that final step yet because he hasn't felt like it's time yet to take that final step. But I mean, he talks about, I mean, he's constantly thinking like, oh, I got to do this now while I have the time, or do this now, or give these people my time now while they have the time. And I mean, it's constantly like, I get it. We know he's contemplating suicide. He's struggling with his PTSD. We don't need to keep hitting the nail. It is already fully embedded in our piece of wood. Like, stop hitting the nail. And then it got to a point where like 3 times in a row, he talked about the taste of his gun. And I was like, I can't. I'm just getting angry about the way that it is being handled. And it wasn't triggering per se to me, but I was getting angry with the way that the writer was handling his situation. And I couldn't read it anymore. I just was like getting angry, and it takes a lot for me to get angry, but I felt angry for the character, which is weird because I don't know. It just really bothered me, if you couldn't tell. So I DNF'd it because I wasn't going to push myself to read it. And then the final 4 books I will just kind of touch base on. I read for the Kindle Unlimited Readathon. I will link my dedicated reading vlog up above so you can hear all about those. But I will just kind of touch base on the books that I read. So the 13th book I read of the month and the first book for the KU Readathon was The Astronaut and the Star by Jen Comfort. This is her debut. And I read this via audiobook, and this is Reggie and John, and it is, as the cover says, an astronaut and a star. So Reggie, our heroine, is an astronaut, and she is tasked to train John, an actor, on how to be an astronaut for an upcoming film project for him. And then I picked up Kiss of the Blood Prince by Alessa Thorn. This is the first book in her Wrath of the Fae series. I am finally reading the series by Alessa Thorn. I love Alessa Thorn, and I have been putting off this series. And why do I do this to myself? I love Alessa Thorn. Why do I keep not picking up her books when I really want to read her books? 5 stars. I love this. This is Elise and Kian, and Kian is the Blood Prince, and basic premise of this series is current day Earth, and magic starts coming back into the world, and then very shortly after, Fae pop back up into the world and take over, and they are taking revenge against humans, specifically humans in Britain and Scotland and Ireland and that kind of area, because the kings thousands of years before were the ones to exile the Fae to their, I don't know, their dimension, I guess I would call it. And so, yeah, they're back to take revenge, and he kidnaps Elise because she sees through his glamour, and it turns out that she's his fated mate. So yeah, 5 stars. I absolutely love this. And I should mention, Alessa Thorn just announced that her Court of the Underworld series is coming in audiobook very soon. And then the spinoff to this series, Ironwood, is also getting audiobook soon. There's no announced dates, but they are coming soon, which is very exciting. So if you're waiting to read these books for audios, this is the only series so far that has audiobooks. The bind up of the trilogy of this is available on Hoopla, but the other ones are coming soon. Then I picked up The Neanderthal Seeks Duchess by Laney Hatcher. This is a part of the Smarty Pants romance collection. This is the first book in the London Ladies Embroidery series, and this series is historical retellings of Penny Reid's Knitting in the City series. I started reading this physically, and then I had to switch to text-to-speech because I was kind of getting frustrated with the situation, but I wanted to try to get through it and see if it'd get better. And I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. I really struggled with this. I felt like there was a lot of, I don't know if it was the writing style that didn't vibe with me, or if it was the fact that it was still too modern in storyline, and it wasn't properly molded or adapted to fit the historical time setting, or if that's just the type of historical romance that she writes, because I know that that's very popular now, is to write the very feminist, heavy historical romances, which I'm not a super big fan of. Or maybe it was a combination of either, but you can see my struggles in my video, like I said, that was linked above. So I gave that one 2.5 stars. And then I ended the month with a bang. And like I said, I don't know why I keep kicking myself for not reading Alessa Thorn. I didn't need to read any paranormal books for the month, but I just had to pick her up. So I picked up Sharpest Edge. This is the second book in her Mercenaries and Magic series, which is her paranormal series. 5 stars. This is Silas and Isabella, and we see hints of them in the first book, and it's a continuation of the first storyline. I gave it 5 stars. Like I said, check the readathon. I already talked too much about these 4 books than I said I was anyway, but yeah, I loved it. It was great. And yeah, those are the 16 books I read in the month of January. So yeah, let me know what your favorite book of January was down below, or if you'd like to leave me a emoji, go ahead and leave me an emoji that reminds you of one of these books. But otherwise, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and I will see you all soon with another video.